Her stepmother dug her grave. But you won't believe the twist that followed. A cruel stepmother, a grave she prepared for her stepdaughter, and then an unbelievable fate took hold. What happened next shocked an entire kingdom, leaving everyone in disbelief. Stay with us, because this story will change how you see betrayal forever. In the colorful kingdom of Makare, where the sun painted the hills gold and the air smelled of spice and harvest, lived a girl named Naella. She was known in every corner of the village, not because of her beauty, but because of her heart and mind. Even as a child, her laughter could melt anger, and her words could settle arguments between the oldest chiefs. Her mother had died when she was born, but her father Kambo raised her with a rare softness, calling her his little lioness with a crown made of wisdom. They lived in a modest clay house near the market, where every evening Naella would help elders count their coins or carry their bags. She asked for nothing in return. People said she had the soul of an old queen. By 12, Naella wasn't just helping, she was leading. She could speak 5 languages like rivers flowing through her lips. She helped traders balance their books, and once, she stopped a land fight between 2 rival families just by asking the right questions. She was gifted, yes, but she was also kind. That was the magic. The villagers whispered that one day she would stand beside kings, or maybe even become one. But just when her life began to shine the brightest, everything changed. Kambo fell ill. A strange fever took his strength, and though Naella did everything, prepared herbs, prayed, stayed up all night fanning his body, he knew he couldn't make it alone anymore, so he made a decision. He married again, thinking it would give Naella a mother and himself a helper in his final days. Her name was Diona. From the moment Diona entered the house, the air changed. She smiled sweetly in front of Kambo, but her eyes were cold stones when she looked at Naella. She brought her daughter, Farrie, a girl 2 years older than Naella, always dressed in shiny clothes and smelling of expensive oils. The day they arrived, Diona hugged Naella tight, but whispered in her ear, "Your time of shining is over." Kambo didn't see it. He was too weak, and Diona pretended too well. But slowly, Naella's life shifted. She was given the smallest room, made to eat last, and ordered to do chores that kept her from her studies. Her books were hidden or burned. When she cried to her father, Diona would sit beside him and say, "She's just going through a phase. She's jealous of Farrie." And Kambo, too tired to fight, believed her. But Naella didn't stop being kind. She still helped in the village, still smiled through the pain, still whispered goodnight to her father when no one was watching. The village noticed. They saw the shift, the dullness in her eyes, the bruises on her hands. But what could they do? They just prayed for her. Little did they know, Diona wasn't just cruel. She was planning something far, far worse. Diona stepped into the house like she owned the whole kingdom. Her chin was always raised, her eyes scanning everything with silent judgment. She never smiled from the heart. Her presence chilled the warm home Kambo and Naella had built. With her came her daughter Farrie, a girl who wore silk like a princess, but behaved like a storm. She was loud, lazy, and quick to anger. She had grown up being praised for nothing, and now she couldn't stand Naella's quiet grace. The moment Diona heard villagers speak of Naella's wisdom, her heart burned with envy. "That girl is born to lead," said the old fish seller. "Naella will bring Makare honor," whispered the weaver. Every compliment stung Diona like a thorn. "Why should they praise a girl that isn't even mine?" she fumed. Her own daughter, Farrie, barely knew how to cook rice, but no one noticed. All eyes were on Naella, so Diona began her mission, not with fire or fists, but with small, sharp cruelties. She ordered Naella to sleep on a thin mat beside the hearth while Farrie had the largest room. "Leaders must know how to suffer," Diona said, with a crooked grin. She replaced Naella's warm meals with leftovers and made her serve everyone else before she could eat. Kambo, growing weaker, didn't see the truth. He thought Diona was trying to teach discipline, but Diona was feeding her own darkness. One day, Naella came home to find her books gone, the ones her father had bought with savings. She searched everywhere, then finally found the pages torn, floating in the fire pit. Diona stood behind her and said, "Firewood suits you more than words." From that day, Naella was banned from reading. Instead, she was made to fetch water, sweep the compound, and walk miles into the forest to gather sticks. Farrie would sit on a stool, brushing her hair, laughing loudly with her mother, mocking Naella's dusty feet. But Naella never screamed, never begged. She woke up before the sun, finished her chores, then helped old women carry yams. or guided lost children back home. She still smiled when others needed her. Her clothes grew thin, her fingers cracked, but her spirit stood tall. Even the villagers saw. She works harder now, whispered one. Still humble, still kind, said another. But the more they praised her, the more Diana's hatred grew. She saw something she couldn't destroy, a strength too quiet to crush, a light too deep to dim. Still, Diana wasn't done. She didn't just want Naella to suffer, she wanted her erased. The kingdom buzzed with excitement when the chief of Makare stood before the people and made an announcement that sent a wave of hope across the land. A royal scholarship had been created, one that would send a single girl from the entire kingdom to the High Palace Academy. It was the greatest opportunity Makare had ever seen. Only one name echoed through the village streets: Naella. Everyone knew she was the brightest. Her mind was quick, her manners flawless, and her heart pure. Elders often said that she carried the wisdom of 10 ancestors in her young soul. She helped settle small disputes, taught children how to read by the riverside, and always greeted others with respect, no matter how tired she was. People would stop her in the market and say, "You are the light of Makare." The chief's wife, a woman of sharp eyes and a sharp tongue, stood before the village square and said, "She is the pride of Makare." The villagers clapped, shouted Naella's name, and children danced around her. Even visitors from nearby kingdoms began to whisper about the girl with the lion's heart and eagle's mind. But in one corner of the crowd stood Diona, arms folded, lips tight, her nails dug into her palms, as she watched the crowd surround Naella with love and joy. Every praise sounded like thunder in her ears. Her daughter Farrie stood beside her, forgotten, unnoticed. That night, Diana paced the floor while Farrie sat polishing her nails. "This village worships that girl," Diana hissed. "She will leave us behind. She will rise too high." Farrie looked up. "She thinks she's better than me. She thinks she's better than all of us," Diana snapped. Then, in a low voice full of fire, she muttered, "Not while I breathe." Diana didn't sleep that night. She sat near the fire, staring into the flames. Her mind turned like a snake, twisting and waiting. She thought of the scholarship, the palace, the crown that could one day rest on Naella's head, and she decided it would never happen. While the village celebrated, Diana planned. She didn't just want to stop Naella, she wanted the world to forget her name. But Naella knew nothing of this darkness. She continued to help the villagers, unaware of the danger growing behind the walls of her own home. She walked through the markets with kindness, helped children study for the palace tests, and reminded them, even if you don't win, always try your best. The villagers believed in her. They dreamed of the day she'd wear the royal robe of the High Palace Academy. But not everyone dreams for your rise. Some, like Diona, only dream of your fall. Diona knew simple jealousy wouldn't stop Naella. The villagers loved her too much, and her brilliance couldn't be hidden. So, she moved quietly, like a snake in tall grass. On the day the palace test papers were to be collected, she waited until Naella went out to fetch water. Then, with hands steady from years of cruelty, she opened the envelope that held Naella's answers. She removed the paper, slipped it into her wrapper, and replaced it with Farrie's weak, scribbled responses. She sealed the envelope again like nothing had happened. To the world, Naella's name was still on the test, but the answers were not hers. That was just the beginning. She went into the village and found 2 idle women known for carrying news like fire. She pressed coins into their hands and whispered lies into their ears. The next morning, rumors spread like dust in the wind. "Did you hear?" someone said near the yam cellar. "Naella insulted the king's guards." Another added, "She called them old and useless." The whispers followed Naella like shadows. When she walked to the market, eyes no longer lit up, faces turned away. Some friends crossed the road without greeting her. The smiles she was used to had turned into stares of doubt. Even the tailor, who once gave her free cloth, now pretended not to see her. Naella felt it, but she said nothing. Her father had always told her, "Truth is like the sun. It may hide behind clouds, but it never disappears." So she kept her head high, walked with grace, and helped where she could. She still carried the baskets of old women, still guided lost children, still watered the chief's dying flowers. Her spirit did not bend, even when her heart ached. But Diona watched and fumed. "Why won't she break?" she muttered to herself. No matter what poison she spread, Naella still rose each day with purpose. That strength, that grace, it was the very thing Diona wanted to destroy. One night, as Farrie sat combing her hair, Diona leaned close and whispered, "We must do more. Farrie looked confused. "What else can we do?" she asked. Diana's eyes narrowed. "It's time. The girl must disappear." There was no shock in her voice, no regret, just cold fire. And in that moment, Farrie knew her mother wasn't done with lies. She was ready for something far worse. The day of the scholarship announcement arrived, and the whole village of Makare gathered near the palace courtyard. Excitement buzzed in the air. Mothers clutched their daughters' hands, hoping for their names to be called. But everyone believed it would be Naella. Even the guards smiled when they saw her in the crowd. She stood tall, clean, and composed, wearing the same simple dress her father had sewn for her before he fell ill. Then, the chief's advisor stepped forward and read the chosen name. Farrie. The crowd froze. A ripple of confusion passed through the people. Some blinked, some gasped. Farrie, standing beside Diana, clapped loudly before anyone else. Her grin stretched wide. Diana pretended to cry tears of joy. But the villagers only exchanged confused looks. They all knew Naella had been the top student. She had answered questions elders couldn't. Farrie, on the other hand, could barely spell her own name, Last Moon. But the chief's word was final. Farrie was declared the winner. Naella didn't shout. She didn't run. She simply nodded, smiled faintly, and whispered, "The truth always walks in daylight." Then she turned and walked away, her head held high, though her heart was heavy. But Diona watched her with narrowed eyes. She saw something dangerous in Naella's calm. Not anger, not revenge, just strength, a quiet kind of power that wouldn't die, even when covered in lies. And Diona feared that. "She still walks like a leader," Diona muttered that night. "She still holds her head too high." Farrie, now polishing her new shoes for the academy, said nothing. Deep down, even she knew the crown didn't fit, but she loved the praise, the dresses, the way people bowed now. She loved being seen as the girl who won. Diana, though, wasn't satisfied. She paced the floor like a trapped lioness. What if the truth returns? What if someone finds the real test? What if the king hears the rumors are false? Her fear grew. "She must vanish," Diona said finally, her voice like a blade. "Her roots must be cut. No trace, no hope, no return." It was no longer about the scholarship. It was about erasing Naella's name from the soil of Makare forever. And so, a darker plan began to form, one that would silence even the brightest voice. But some lights refused to die, even when hidden beneath the deepest earth. Late one night, under a blood-orange moon that hung low in the sky, Diana called Naella from her mat. Her voice was soft, almost sweet. "Come," she whispered. "There is one thing left to bring peace to your father's spirit." Naella blinked sleep from her eyes, unsure, but the mention of her father made her nod. She wrapped herself in a shawl and followed Diona into the dark. They walked for a long time, past the tall grasses and silent stones, toward the quiet valley of Mwendo. The wind there didn't sing, it held its breath. Even the trees stood still, as if they knew something was wrong. Diona carried a small sack and kept glancing back, her footsteps silent. "We are close," she said. "There is a fig tree where healing stones grow beneath the roots. The elders say only the pure-hearted can find them." Naella's brows furrowed. She had never heard of such a thing. But Diona had a way of making lies sound like lullabies. They reached the fig tree, old and twisted, standing alone in the hollow. Diana pointed to the base. "There, do you see the stone with the silver edge? Take it." Naella knelt slowly, brushing away the loose soil. Her fingers touched something cool, and then, suddenly, the ground beneath her shifted. It wasn't natural. It was too soft, too prepared. Before she could react, Diana's hands shoved her forward with force. Naella tumbled into the pit, a deep, dark hole carefully dug days before. The fall knocked the wind out of her. Dirt scattered around her as she looked up in shock. Diana stood at the edge, her face no longer sweet, but cruel and cold. "This is where your story ends," she said quietly. "The world will forget you." She picked up a heavy stone. Naella screamed, not out of fear, but disbelief. "Why?" she asked. "You were never meant to shine brighter than my blood," Diana hissed. She raised the stone, but just then, a sharp cry cut through the silence. It wasn't Naella, it was Farrie. She had followed them, curious, wanting to know what her mother was hiding. She hadn't meant to speak, but the sight of her mother holding a rock over Naella's head made her gasp. Diana froze. The stone trembled in her grip. "Farrie!" she said, voice cracking. Farrie stepped closer, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" And in that moment, the power Diana held cracked. The silence was broken. And though Naella was still in the grave, hope had not died. Something had shifted, something big. "Mother!" A voice rang out, sharp and furious. Diana's head snapped up. It was Farrie, running fast toward them from the shadows, her face twisted with anger and confusion. "You said we'd do it together," she yelled. "You said I would get to see her fall." Diana's heart jolted. She hadn't expected Farrie to follow. "No, Farrie, wait," she cried, stepping back in panic. But the ground near the edge of the grave was loose and crumbling. In her haste, Diana's foot slipped on the soft earth. She twisted, arms flailing. Farrie, still charging forward, didn't see it coming. Her feet struck a rock. She stumbled, arms reaching toward her mother, but there was no grip, just air. And then she fell, straight into the pit. The sound of her scream ripped through the valley like a wild storm, and then, nothing. Silence swallowed everything. Naella, lying at the base of the grave, blinked in shock as a heavy weight slammed beside her. Dirt flew. Pain shot through her side. But when she turned her head, she didn't see Diana. She saw Farrie, still, broken, not moving. Blood trickled from her nose. Her eyes stared wide open at the sky. Dead silence. For a moment, Naella couldn't breathe. The world tilted. What just happened? She tried to push herself up, her hands shaking, knees scraped and bruised. Above the grave, Diana stood frozen. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes locked on her daughter's lifeless body. Her hands trembled like dry leaves in the wind. Then, her face twisted with pain. "No, no," she shrieked, falling to her knees at the edge. "Not her! Not my Farrie!" She wailed, louder than the night owls, louder than the wind. Her cries were wild, broken, inhuman. The mother who plotted evil was now crushed by her own darkness. Her scream echoed across the valley, bouncing off the hills, mourning not just her daughter, but her own soul. She tried to climb into the grave, clawing at the dirt, sobbing uncontrollably. "Farrie, my child, wake up. It wasn't meant to be you." Naella stayed still. Her heart ached, not for Diana, but for how far hate had pushed a woman. The grave meant for her had taken the one who followed cruelty like a game. Now, everything was quiet, except for Diana's cries. Even the stars seemed to dim. The night, once filled with Diana's wicked plan, now stood witness to the punishment written by fate itself. And in that moment, the valley of Mwendo held two things: one broken mother, and one girl rising from a grave not meant for her. They returned to the village carrying Farrie's lifeless body. Diana, wild-eyed and frantic, screamed at the top of her lungs, blaming Naella for what happened. "It was her fault. She pushed her. She pushed my Farrie into the grave." Her voice cracked with desperation. The villagers gathered, murmuring, but no one dared question Diana, at least not aloud. But Diana had forgotten one crucial detail: the old goat herder, who lived on the outskirts of Mwendo. He had seen everything. The old man, hunched and bent with age, had been sitting on the hill, watching his goats when he witnessed the whole thing unfold. He had seen Diana and Naella walk toward the fig tree and had noticed something strange about their movements. He had seen Diana push her stepdaughter into the pit, and then he saw Farrie, running in too late, stumbling and falling in herself. His heart had ached, and he had kept quiet, too shocked to speak. But when he heard Diana blaming Naella, he knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. He walked into the village square the next day, leaning on his staff. His face was lined with wisdom, and his eyes were clear with truth. "I must speak," he said, his voice strong for his age. All eyes turned to him. Diana froze, her face paling as he approached. "I saw it all," the old man said, his voice echoing through the crowd. "I saw Diana push her stepdaughter into that grave. She planned to kill Naella, but instead, her own daughter fell in." The entire village gasped. Whispers spread like wildfire. "What? The stepmother planned to kill the girl?" One person gasped. "She dug the grave for her stepdaughter, but her own blood fell into it," another whispered. The rumors were like a storm, tearing through the village with shocking speed. Eyes that had once looked at Diana with respect, now filled with distrust and fear. Her secret was out. The wickedness that she had tried to bury in the grave was now exposed to the light. The chief, who had been watching from a distance, stepped forward. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. "Diona," he called, his voice commanding attention. "What do you say to these accusations?" Diona stood frozen, her face a mask of panic. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The truth had caught her in its grip. The village had witnessed her lies, her manipulation, and her cruelty. The chief's voice boomed. "This will be a public judgment. The people of Makare have the right to know the truth." As the villagers gathered, murmurs of anger and disbelief filled the air. Diona's face turned pale, and she knew there was no escape. Her plans had crumbled. The weight of her betrayal was too much to bear. Naella stood in silence, no longer afraid. The truth had won. The wickedness of her stepmother had been exposed, and she would no longer be the target of lies and cruelty. Now, Diona would face the consequences of her actions. Naella stood before the royal court, her posture steady, her eyes clear. The murmurs of the crowd faded as she gazed calmly at the king, who sat on his throne, watching her with a gaze full of respect. Despite everything she had endured, Naella carried herself with the grace of someone who had been through fire and emerged unburned. The king cleared his throat and addressed the court. "You have suffered the worst of injustices, yet you remained pure in heart. You showed strength when others would have broken. You are the kind of person we dream of for our daughters." The words echoed through the hall, and for the first time, Naella felt like she was seen for who she truly was, not a victim, but a symbol of resilience. A murmur of approval passed through the court. The king continued, his voice carrying the weight of authority and admiration. "As a mark of our respect, I hereby grant you a full scholarship to the High Palace Academy, a royal badge of honor, and a place among the youth leaders of our kingdom." The room erupted in applause. Naella's heart raced, but she remained composed, her face breaking into a small, knowing smile. This was her moment, her rise from the ashes. The king had not just recognized her intelligence and strength, but her integrity. And now, she was about to take her place among the kingdom's leaders. Meanwhile, Diona, who had been watching from the shadows, was summoned to the front. Her once proud face was now twisted with fear. She had never imagined this day would come. The king's voice cut through the air. "Diona, you have been exposed for the darkness in your heart. Your actions have caused pain and betrayal to a girl who only sought to do good." Diona's knees buckled as the weight of her actions bore down on her. The king's gaze was cold. "You are hereby stripped of your name, your property, and your dignity. You will be cast out, a pariah in this kingdom." As Diona was escorted out of the court, her head hung low in shame. The once proud woman, who had tried to destroy another's life, now faced the consequences of her cruelty. Her fall from grace was swift, her reputation shattered. Naella, on the other hand, stood tall as the court cheered her name. She had overcome the wickedness of her stepmother, and now she was being honored for her bravery, intelligence, and character. Her heart swelled with pride, not for the scholarship or the royal badge, but for the truth that had set her free. She knew this was only the beginning. Her rise was just starting, and nothing could stop her now. The people of Makare had seen her strength, and they would follow her as a leader, knowing that she had earned her place through integrity and resilience. Diona's fall from grace was swift and unforgiving. After her exposure, she was exiled to the barren edge of Makare, far from the life she once knew. The village no longer whispered her name with reverence. They now muttered it in disdain. She wandered alone, with no one to speak to, no one to care for her. Her days were filled with begging for scraps, her nights haunted by the memory of the grave she had dug for Naella. The pit she had prepared for someone else became the symbol of her own undoing. The wind seemed to carry her desperate mutterings as she begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. The kingdom had turned its back on her, and no amount of remorse could wash away the stains of her cruelty. Meanwhile, Naella's story took a different turn. The girl who had once been betrayed and pushed aside was now a beacon of hope for the kingdom. She returned to Makare, not in chains or with a sense of shame, but in a golden chariot, a symbol of her triumph. The chariot rolled through the streets, and the market women who had once whispered cruel words behind her back now sang her name in joyous chorus. Her every step radiated strength and grace, and the people who had once doubted her now saw her as the leader they had always needed. Children stopped playing in the streets to watch her pass, their eyes filled with awe. They whispered the lessons of her journey to one another, learning that strength isn't always about power, but about standing tall when others want to see you fall. Naella had proven that no matter how dark the path, the light of truth would always lead the way. The market women who had once judged her now cheered for her. She's the true daughter of Makare, they said. They had witnessed her rise from nothing, from a girl who was forced into the shadows, to a woman who would lead them all into a brighter future. And as the chariot continued its path through the heart of the village, a new saying began to spread. It was a warning, a lesson for all who would listen. Dig no grave for the innocent, for fate may bury your own blood in it. The words rang true, echoing through the streets of Makare, a reminder of the price of betrayal and the power of justice. Diana's name, once spoken with respect, was now a cautionary tale, while Naella's name became a symbol of resilience, wisdom, and triumph. The people of Makare had learned a lesson they would never forget, that the innocent cannot be buried, for their spirits will rise, while those who seek to harm them will fall. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of Naella's rise from betrayal to triumph. Her story is one of strength, resilience, and the power of standing tall in the face of adversity. It reminds us that no matter how deep the darkness may seem, the light of truth will always shine through. The lesson we learn from Naella's experience is simple yet powerful. The innocent will always rise, and those who try to bury them will ultimately fall. If Naella's journey touched your heart, if you believe in the power of justice and resilience, don't keep this story to yourself. Share it with others who need to hear it. Like and share this video to spread the message that no one should ever be silenced or overlooked. Naella's story can inspire anyone who feels alone or unheard to keep pushing forward, no matter the obstacles they face. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming and powerful tales like this one. We've got many more stories to share, each filled with hope, wisdom, and lessons that can change lives. Thank you so much for being part of this community. Your support means the world to us, and together we can continue to spread love, truth, and courage through every story we tell. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.